This week, we will be discussing organic matter in the soil system. You need to understand the following key points, including what is organic matter, how organic matter, or OM, forms, and why OM, organic matter, is so important. So let's go to the core and try to figure out what organic matter really is in the first place. And organic matter is animal or plant remains at various stages of decay. So this can be broken down into three pools, including stage one, living stuff, stage two, the dead stuff, and stage three, humus. Now we'll look a little bit deeper into the chemistry of organic materials. So organic matter produces a couple different things. We have carbon, and carbon creates carbohydrates such as sugars and starches and cellulose and lignin, right? And plants uses these sugars and starches to store their energy. And they also have cellulose, and cellulose is the main structure of the plant. So humans digest cellulose very poorly, and this may cause digestive issues. The cellulose may also be called fiber. And then we have lignin, and lignin is the glue that holds the cellulose together. And lignin makes wood in the woody plants. Lignin also protects cellulose from microbial attack, and microbial attack is attack from microbial organisms, okay, like the microbes that we talked about. So that's the bacteria and fungus and whatnot. Lignin also makes plants and plant stuff and gives the plant support. So lignin is about 10 to 30% by volume of a plant, and it is very resistant to decay. It usually stays within the humus or the O to A layer. And also, one more thing about lignin, then we'll move on. Lignin can only be digested by some fungus and bacteria. And organic matter also provides proteins. And proteins, that's the long chains, right, made up of individual amino acids. Unlike carbohydrates that are rich in nitrogen and sulfur, source of most nitrogen in organic matter. And we also have a different wax and fats as well. And that is long carbon chains bonded with lots of hydrogen. And these fats can be found in fruits and vegetables like avocados and nuts. And waxes can also be found on plant species such as Picea pungens variety glauca, as we see here. How about decay? Now, the process of decay includes 4 steps, and that is solution, fragmentation, decay, and humification. We first have fresh detritus. And fresh detritus in general is waste or debris of any kind. So this fresh detritus can be any fresh waste or debris. In this case, it's leaves on the soil surface. So first we have leaves that have fallen to the soil surface. Next, with the decay process, we have solution. And here the solution is rain, right? It's water-soluble nutrients that wash into the soil. So we have a rainfall. And that rainfall is making those soluble nutrients wash into the soil. So the amino acids, the sugars, the potassium go into the soil. And by washing those soluble nutrients into the soil, now we have that microbial activity wanting to eat at that and start the decomposition process. Now, fragmentation occurs when macrofauna, which macrofauna is what? It's the larger, it's macro, and that's what we can actually see. So maybe that's earthworms or squirrels in this case, or different rodents of any kind, right? So that starts when macrofauna move in and start eating the detritus. The macrofauna shred up the detritus, digesting some microbes, and creates more surface area, destroying those lignin and wax coatings that it's very difficult to process and decompose. And the decay process occurs through mineralization. Mineralization occurs when complex molecules are split and digested. And this makes the materials break down very quickly. Now, humification occurs through chemical processes, not biological processes. So the soil nitrogen reacts with different materials that alter the chemical makeup of the soil. This process occurs through very complex molecules, and this results in high nitrogen, which is very resistant to decay. So when this high nitrogen comes up, the carbon to nitrogen ratio will come up throughout this, will increase. And carbon to nitrogen ratio is going to come up throughout the semester and is very important to understand. So carbon to nitrogen ratio, or C to N, is a ratio of the mass of carbon to the mass of nitrogen in a substance. So for example, we have C to N of 10 to 1. And this means it's 10 units of carbon for each unit of nitrogen in the substance. So since the C to N ratio of everything in and on the soil can have a significant effect on the crop residue in the decomposition. But we'll get more into the C to N ratio later on in this presentation. So humus is very dark and black coats soil particles in small particle size like clay or micropores. So here's the decay process in a timeline. So the decay process starts fast, then slows over time. So the most liable materials are usually gone within 1 week. Even humus oxidizes through microbial digestion slowly, but this decay is biological and extremes may slow down this process. So this extreme can include pH, soluble salts, cold, and maybe over wet, dry conditions as well. So the organic matter in soil has two different sections. It has active fraction and passive fraction. So with active fraction, it is rapidly decaying. This results in particulate organic matter, or POM. And this adds a good amount of organic matter quickly to the soil. Then we have passive fraction, and this is the largest fraction, resulting in soil organic matter, or SOM, and it has very slow formation and is very chemically active. So you may ask yourself, what does organic matter actually do? So the functions of organic matter include nutrient storage, water storage, soil aggregation, and erosion prevention. Nutrients stored by organic matter occurs in two ways. It's like clay. It is very, in many respects, because clay has a lot of micropores there. Another thing with clays, they attract a lot of nutrients to the soil. So just like clay, organic matter has a lot of micropores, and it's going to be attracting a lot of nutrients to the soil as well. So it's going to be holding a lot of these nutrients in. And you would think that's a good thing, right? You don't want a soil that leaches a lot of the nutrients, right? Because how are the plants going to retain those nutrients? You want a soil with a lot of organic matter because that organic matter supplies a lot of an abundance of nutrients to the plants. Now, organic matter is very similar to a sponge. It could hold up to 6 times its weight in water. So it's going to increase water holding capacity in the soil, especially if you have, say, a sandier soil that has drastic drainage that we discussed last week. So applying that organic matter can increase the water holding capacity. Organic matter also helps soil particles clump together to make beds, right? Because it has a lot of those micropores and it has the ability to hold a lot of nutrients as well. It's going to provide that moisture, right? To make sure those aggregates are holding together to the sand, to silt, to clay. So those black spaces are that organic matter that holds everything to place, hence forming more soil aggregates and making the soil structure better long term. Organic matter can also improve erosion because it not only holds a lot of water, but it also improves permeability. And that again is how porous is that soil and how well does the soil permit the passage of water through the voids. And I know it's kind of confusing that organic matter increases water holding capacity, but also can increase permeability and aeration into the soil. But this can be understood as organic matter first makes the soil, hold a lot of the water because it has a lot of micropores there. But organic matter also supplies a lot of nutrients to the soil and hence increases microbial activity. And that microbial activity that increases in the soil is going to create different pores as well there, right? The micropores and or microfauna and macrofauna increases pore spaces, remember, because of those biopores as well. So this is going to increase the aeration there. And it also improves soil aggregates. So if it improves soil aggregates and improves soil structure, it's going to increase drainage, right? Just like we see here, the water penetrating through the soil now. So what really affects organic matter? So vegetation, climate, the soil texture, drainage, and tillage all affect organic matter. So vegetation affects organic matter due to their root systems, really. So with prairie plants, including wildflowers, perennials, and grasses, they have very long, extensive root systems. So the root systems are fibrous as well, and they grow very deep. And with this process, the roots die annually. So when those roots die, the roots not only aerate the soil, making pores within the soil, but it also makes the soil healthier because it adds more organic matter to the soil by the dead roots decomposing into the soil. As herbaceous plants die, like the top portion of the plant dies, this also, and is left on the soil surface, this also adds to the organic matter content of the soil because the upper portion of the plant will decompose, adding more organic matter content into the soil. So with trees and shrubs, it's a little bit different. They have more of a shallow root system and have very little dieback of roots. The dieback of roots and aeration of the pores of the roots may increase organic matter production, but it's really when the trees and shrubs drop their foliage, the foliage is left on the soil surface, and this decomposes into the soil and adds to the organic matter content. So climate can also affect organic matter. So in arid climates where there is very little moisture and little vegetation, there will be little organic matter. But with the increase in rainfall and moisture, this results in more vegetation and all around more organic matter production. And then more heat results in less organic matter content in the soil because with high temperatures, organic matter decays at a quicker pace. So over 77 degrees, organic matter decays extremely fast, but organic matter will not decay below 41 degrees. Now, soil texture can also affect organic matter. So fine soils with a lot of micropores results in more organic matter. This is due to fine soils holding a lot more water. Soils with fine particles can support more plants because of the high water holding capacity compared to sandier soils that cannot support as many plants. So here it's saying a soil that supplies more water holding capacity is going to have more plants on it that originate there. And then the plants are going to drop their foliage, or maybe the roots are going to die. That adds to the organic matter content. So does that make sense? All of the foliage coming off, decomposing into the root systems, and then also the roots there as well adds the organic matter content compared to more coarse soils that have very little vegetation, and that's less organic matter that's being put into the soil because there are less plants there. So drainage also affects organic matter, and it honestly has the most dramatic effect on soil organic matter levels because with wetter soils, this results in less oxygen and slower decay. And with slower decay, we're not going to have a lot of organic matter there. Now, soil tilth is another term for tillage or the cultivation of land. This can affect organic matter. So of course, whenever we're cropping, we're taking away the majority of the foliage a lot of the time. Sometimes if it's a root crop, we'll remove the root. But in this case, the cropping returns a lot less organic matter to the soil than just native vegetation. And then tillage also stirs the oxygen into the soil, which reduces that organic matter whenever you're tilling and turning that soil, it is being exposed to the oxygen more, and that's going to increase the production of organic matter, and it's going to just quicken up the pace of it decomposing. So even if you have organic matter in the soil, if you apply organic matter with tilling it, it's going to rapidly decay. So maybe you only have it for a week. We don't want organic matter just short term, we want it long term. So tilling definitely reduces that because it's being exposed to oxygen. So now we covered, now you know how organic matter is produced. So how can we maintain this organic matter? So different things to maintain organic matter include conservation tillage, no-till, green manure or cover crops, crop rotation, amendments, and mulches. So conservation tillage is a tillage system that creates a suitable soil environment for growing a crop, and it conserves the soil all around. So it reduces water and energy resources, and mainly this is done through the reduction in the intensity of tillage, and also the retention of plant residues, which are usually scraped from the surface. So this reduces, in this process, it reduces the tillage depth. It varies depths every year and tills with different machines using, and also uses herbicides. So a reason why it reduces tillage depth is so we don't have that hard band that is created, right? We talked about conventional tillage, how they till at the certain depth at every single year. Here we're varying depths. So that hard pan or plow pan does not occur. And then it also uses different machinery. If you use different machinery, it is going to create some diversity there. You're not going to be using the same machine. Still, with using the same machine, you might be creating some different hard pans here and there. With using different machines, you're using different blades as well. So it's going to break up different materials in a variety of ways. And then the use of herbicides. So the main point for tilling the soil is to pretty much get rid of what we had for the last year, getting rid of weeds and all of that. And it's a quick way of doing this. Applying herbicides. Herbicides is a pesticide that decreases weeds or herbaceous plants. So applying herbicides, you do not need a till. With applying herbicides, it decreases all of the weeds and eliminates them. But in this case, you have to use a product. So we also have no-till, and no-till is a way of growing crops year to year without disturbing the soil through tillage. No-till is a ag technique which increases the amount of water that infiltrates into the soil and the soil's retention of organic matter and the cycling of these nutrients as well. So it could also reduce or eliminate soil erosion because we're not tilling it every single year, we're leaving it go, right? And this increases the amount of variety of life in the soil as well. But increasing the amount of life in the soil can be good because we have a lot of microbial activity, and microbial and macro fauna is really awesome for the soil because it's aerating the soil, it's giving back organic matter. But a problem is it also includes disease-causing organisms into the soil that could decrease the yields as well. So there's definitely pros and cons of that. But if you control the different pests in the soil by doing preventatives, applying different pesticides and whatnot, it should be fine. But you're definitely going to have issues with this technique as well. But definitely with this technique with no-till, it's the most powerful benefit is it improves the soil biological fertility. And this makes the soil definitely more resilient, especially with those disease-causing organisms or different pests that come on these plants. And then we have the regular conventional tillage, and that's tilling at the same depth with the same equipment year after year, and they don't really use a lot of herbicides here. And they usually just rely on tilling the soil for the reduction of weeds, which you can apply the herbicide, but they really rely on tillage here. Conventional tillage, going at the same exact depth, tilling at the same depth with the same exact machinery every year. This can create hard compacted layers called a plow pan. Plow pans occur due to the tilling the same depth year after year. And this induces challenges for the roots to penetrate that layer. So the roots will grow toward the plow pan and fail to penetrate the plow pan, and they will grow horizontally instead. So this may create girdling roots and a shortage of nutrients and water for the plant. So you can see from the photo on the right, with long-term no-till, there's no plow pan and the roots are free to penetrate the soil profile freely. This method reduces the risk of girdling roots in competition for nutrients and water for the plant. If you guys do not know what girdling roots are, it's when roots girdle themselves. So they intertwine with themselves from the reduction of space. And when you have girdling roots, it pretty much restricts them. So it's kind of like choking yourself. So it's restricting the other roots. And if you restrict roots, this is going to restrict airflow and water and nutrients to get to the plant. And this can cause issues long term. So green manure are crops planted to be later tilled into the soil, and this adds organic matter. This can also be such like as legumes. These plants also provide different nitrogen fixating properties as well. We have cover crops, which control winter erosion and are planted between main crops. So these cover crops include winter annual legumes, peas, hair fetch, clover, cowpeas, soybeans. There's a lot of them. We have different perennial legumes like alfalfa, different grasses like winter rye and oats and buckwheat as well. We also have mulching mowers. So in landscapes, we take away the leaves. And when we remove grass and grass clippings, we also take the clippings away to make the lawn more manicured, right? A lot of people don't want their clippings to be left behind because it's not picture perfect. So by using a mulching mower, we can add those clippings back to the soil and improve organic matter content. So you can improve the soil organic matter content by adding amendments of organic matter. And this includes a lot of compost. Compost is decayed organic matter. So compost sources include, but they're definitely not limited to, there's a ton of compost sources, but it can be animal manure, mushroom, Milorganite. Milorganite is heat-dried microbes that have been digested the organic matter into wastewater. So yes, that is coming from wastewater, but it's still a source of organic matter. And then mulching. So applying mulch also increases organic matter. So this could be grass clippings, leaves, bark, etc. Can be used for mulching, but you need to be careful with the carbon and nitrogen ratio. So as discussed earlier in this lecture, carbon to nitrogen ratio, or C to N, is a ratio of the mass of carbon in the soil. The mass of carbon to the mass of nitrogen in a substance. So for example, C to N of 10 to 1 means there is 10 units of carbon for each unit of nitrogen in the substance. So the ideal carbon to nitrogen ratio is between 25 to 30 carbon to 1 parts carbon. I'm sorry, 25 to 30 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. Here we have common mulches and manures used for amending organic matter content and their respective C to N ratios. So it's important to know the typical C to N ratio of different plants before applying them to a soil because it can cause a lot of issues. Issues include rapid decomposition of the organic matter. This is an issue because you want the organic matter to last long term to give nutrients back to the plants for longer periods, not just short periods. So if you have extreme carbon and nitrogen ratios, you better believe that the organic matter that you just put down, that amendment that you just put down, it's going to decay very rapidly. So you want something that's going to last more long term. And also, if you apply high carbon to nitrogen ratios in the soil might immobilize the nitrogen in the soil, leaving the nitrogen unavailable to plants. So this can also result in a decrease of yields and productivity of the plants.